Hi. Hey, I would just like to congratulate all of you because you made it through the first day. This is the last event, and thank you for coming. I'm delighted to have everyone here. How's the event been going for everyone? Yes? Thumbs up. Yes? Good, good, good. Well, thank you for joining us. My name is Ann Merrihew. I work for Amazon Web Services. I took off the badge because it clashes with my red, but I promise I do work. I actually run U.S. education for Amazon Web Services. And today we're going to be talking about innovation. It's a word that people use a lot. We felt that the most important message we could give you about innovation is to let other people who are actually doing innovative things on Amazon Web Services share their experiences with you. Couple of things before we start. I'm really curious in this room, how many people are focused on education in the room? Can you raise your hands? All right, and this is helpful for the panel. How many of you are focused on federal? Okay, quite a few. State and local? Yep, and then nonprofit. All right, good. So we've got a good mixture. And if I didn't ask your specific, I'm sorry. It's public sector, so I think we covered almost everything. So today we're actually going to be giving everyone up on the stage time to talk about what they've done in their respective segments under worldwide public sector to really drive innovation. And the way that we'd really like to do this is to give each one of the folks here talking today time to share what they're doing, and then I have canned questions, but I actually think it's much more interesting because as you hear their stories you may think of questions. I will have a microphone. I'd love to open it up to the audience first. We can always rely on the questions that I have, but I think you're going to find some pretty interesting stories here, and if you have questions just hold them, because once we go through the entire panel then we can open that up for questions. So I'm just going to have each panel person start and talk a little bit about what their experience has been. And I think, Sean, we'll start with you just so you know. They're sitting in order of what you're seeing up on the slides here. So, Sean, if you wouldn't mind starting first, we'd love to hear what your story is and what kind of innovation did you drive based on your experience working with AWS?
You bet. So, first off, I like the way even Ann is at the beginning of the line, right? So she, like I said, there is a plan. So thanks a lot for everyone coming out. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was a long day, and we're going to make this be the best one. And because, you know, I think from our perspective, innovation is in the hearts and minds of everyone, right? A lot of people talk about innovation and want to actually be innovative, but the challenge is connecting the dots and actually putting the rubber on the ground, right, and actually driving results. So I think it's important when we start to look at innovation and we look at what I call digital in the space of cloud computing, I think it's good to go backwards a little bit. And I don't know if you all remember the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. So I stood up Recoverygov, federalreporting.gov, and several other systems. And if you remember that, Recovery.gov was the first federal-wide system to actually migrate to the public cloud. And so when you look at where we were then in the space, I mean, because it's hard to, time passes so fast, you forget where we came from when you start to look at where we are today. And that was innovative because the concept of actually putting workloads in the cloud that were actually I'm going to say citizen engagement types of workloads and transparency and beginning to connect the dots, and is actually getting into, it begins to get kind of sensitive, right? When you actually say I'm connecting the dots of people, places, awards, who was awarded what and what have you, and the concept of making that type of information transparent was innovative in its time. And when you look at what it meant to do that, I think we actually kind of pushed the limits on what, I'm going to say what Amazon was doing at that time, because we got into, if we were to go down, and this is the interesting thing, several people in this room have this same challenge today. If we went down, we were on the cover of the Post. It just was what it was, meaning, so we had to actually architect a system that had redundancy in a way where we had mirrored availability zones, mirrored regions, and edge services when you look at CDNs with 98% cache ratio. So the concept back then, if we were to go down, there were aliens attacking the planet, right? But now you start to look at, and throughout that period of time, we started moving other workloads into hybrid types of computing when you look at fraud, waste, and abuse, and starting to put sensitive data in, and I hear it's some state and local in here and federal. So now things like sieges becomes important to people, right? And now it's happening and being accepted across the board. So now when you look at where we are today, it's lots of, I think the key buzzword that's putting innovation on the ground is really hybrid. And when I say hybrid, everyone has different definitions of what that means, right? We say hybrid, right? Hybrid is really connecting the dots between an on-prem type of configuration and pushing information, pushing and pulling information between what the Internet of Things, right? And right now, everything is based on user-centered design because users, the people, it's all based on that customer experience of interacting with data to turn that into something useful. So from that perspective, there's this hybrid way of computing, delivering services in a secure fashion, and supporting the various workloads that you all support today from when you look at policing, the way body cams are actually used today, and pushing that data up into the Amazon cloud, actually. And that's a big thing that you all do nowadays, all the way down to understanding what's going on when citizens cross the border and actually running real-time analytics against that information, against thousands of data sources, and actually targeting and having the appropriate police and what have you get involved. But lots of opportunities to do lots of interesting things, and these are some of the things that we're seeing globally, right? Not just in US and Canada, but it's also when you get into the UK, when you get into, like I said, Malaysia and those types of places, lots of interesting things happening, and what we're starting to see is people are pushing the limits, meaning they're actually looking at, it's not why I can't, which is what it was 5, 6 years ago. Now it's why can't I do interesting things? Why can't I enable within my corporation, government, state and local services, provide the same level of capabilities that users and citizens actually receive at home? I don't want to take up everybody's time. But.
No, that's great. And I mean, Recovery.gov, that was a huge thing when that first came out. Anything else you want to say about the fact, why was that so innovative at the time? Was it because people just didn't think it could be done, or what did you experience as you were building that out?
So what made Recovery.gov so, I'm going to say, important and historic is that was the first real transparency initiative. That actually put the stake in the ground when you look at how does government increase confidence in citizens, and how do we actually begin to share information so the citizens can see where money is going and what the government is actually doing. And that's the goal of it, to build confidence, right? And to actually show that, now in retrospect, it also shows the art of the possible. And those are the things that we don't talk much about, is we had actually 2 real goals. One was to actually get the job done, meet our legal mandates, and deliver the services. But in parallel, it was also to look at it from an experimentation perspective, to be able to show the rest of the federal agencies and the country what's actually possible when it's a new agency, right? Because so I've also worked for the USDA Forest Service for 17 years. So I've gone through legacy systems and the challenge of bureaucracy and the challenge of how do I actually push this down the road when I got teams of people that have investments in legacy systems, right? So there was an unsaid goal to actually begin to show the art of the possible. What can we do? And how does business drive technology, and technology enable government to actually meet its goals and objectives, versus it's not about mops and brooms. And today, I think that's what you see. The conversation isn't about mops and brooms, it's about services and outcomes. And now, how can I better deliver these services? Better, faster. And I'll give one more interesting example, and then I will move it on. But I mean, there was, from an innovation perspective, this was really interesting. as we got into a lot of the fraud, waste, and abuse mission, right, we were pulling in large amounts of data, right, from, you know, you have every entity that's ever done business with the federal government, right? We looked at it as resource data, and then we have risk data. If you're on the excluded party list, or if you're dead in death master file, you're not supposed to, you should be receiving contracts, right? And there's a variety of other types of I'm going to say, detections. So what happened is we actually had, we would bump up 100 million records against 390 million rows. And when we first did it, it would take us 3 hours to run the algorithms against that. So then the first phase of this was, you know, we had to say, the longer it takes for you to get to the end of this, the further the money is actually getting away from you, right? So we were the first federal customer to actually stand up HANA. And when we stood up HANA, we actually turned that 3 hours into 3 minutes. But the other interesting thing was when we pushed that workload and increased it by orders of magnitude to 30 billion records, we did it in 30 seconds, and we pushed that workload actually to Amazon. So there were interesting, when you look at innovation, innovation happens all around us, but the key is you have to have people that are creative enough to come up with the how can we versus why we can't.
Perfect. Great, thank you. And as I said, we'll take questions after we go through everyone on the panel. I'm sure people may have some questions more about that because there's some really fascinating metrics in that. Chris, can you share a little bit about what you've experienced in terms of innovation on AWS?
Sure, no problem. Actually, the fact that we're on a cloud innovation panel is a good advertisement for us. A few years ago within Booz Allen, we really saw a change happening out in the marketplace in 2 perspectives. The first one was that the government market and the public sector market in general was changing. There were some market forces going on there, whether it be limited budget, turned towards more commoditized IT, things like that. And there was really a confluence of that combined with really an abrupt and rapidly changing technology environment, and where our clients were actually struggling to understand how best to adopt those technologies within their own programs and environments. So as a result, we actually established what we call the Strategic Innovation Group. And it's no secret, I mean, it's obvious why we would want innovation as part of that title, because what that group really focuses on, in addition to market responsibilities, is trying to develop new products and services. And needless to say, cloud is such a huge part of it. I actually, for me personally, coming into this group that we've established, I actually have more of a network and IT infrastructure background rather than a developer background by trade. But as a result, what we've done is we have different teams that we've established, a lot focus on digital, but the team that I lead is actually focused on what we call secure cloud and software-defined networking. And I think it's a different perspective that it's actually pretty exciting for what's happening there within the cloud, in that there is innovation to be had around how you implement the infrastructure and the networking necessary to transport traffic to and from the cloud within VPCs, between VPCs. And it's been a lot of fun over the past couple of years, because what we've tried to do is actually adopt the really deep network and cyber and overall IT security work that we've been doing traditionally within the DoD to sort of say, okay, customers are going to have to migrate their workloads over to the cloud. And as a result, you know, even Amazon talks about a shared security responsibility model. Well, we've actually come in and virtualized the traditional security applications, worked with the vendors, worked with Amazon to create what we call a virtual cloud defense suite that customers can deploy within the cloud to protect those workloads. And really, that's involved a lot of innovation, because it's really trying to stretch the boundaries of what those traditional vendors who are used to implementing their security functions within physical hardware to virtualize those, and then how best to use those within the constraints of AWS. working with the cloud architects at AWS to see how best to avoid routing loops and other challenges that could emerge with how you architect things. So really, when we're talking about that, it just it really gets into another realm that's highly related to cloud, which is network function virtualization, as well as software-defined networking, and really trying to get to that automation. In the last panel, I heard automation around workloads and server management. Well, there's also a lot of automation to be had around networking and how best to migrate VMs from on-prem to cloud-based environments and things like that. So what we're really seeing is, hey, my time is decreasing rapidly. So what we're really seeing is just trying to take advantage of those the advancements that we're seeing out there in the marketplace to bring it to the cloud, to adequately protect those workloads, establish the hybrid network connectivity that's required, and further really take what has been done so greatly within the application and cloud environment and extend that out to the network and security functions that you have to automate as well.
Yes, interesting, because I remember when we first were talking about this, I don't often think of security and innovation together. Security feels very much like a box. We got to make sure that we check it or that we fit everything inside, and yet that's really what you've done to a great degree. And I'm just curious, did that come from your customers telling you what their need was, or how did that start as an innovative track for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it came out of what was emerging out of the DoD, but we've been able to expand it out to the marketplace. And really our knowledge of what their overall security requirements were, and knowing that they're going to have to meet those same requirements out in the cloud, and our knowledge of the way that AWS works in that there is that shared responsibility model. So someone would have to pick it up, and we've tried to do that with our clients.
Perfect. Great. So how many of you got to see the keynote this morning? All right. So you heard Teresa talk about Ivy Tech. Elijah's here. I'm excited to have him share his story about innovation. He told me outside he didn't think it was that innovative, and that's because he thinks it's normal. But what he has done at Ivy Tech Community College really is something that others have not. And I think he's really paving the way. So he will say that, no, this is what we should be doing. But I think it's a great story. So love to hear it.
Okay, well, I was going to ask who had heard of Ivy Tech, but I guess after this morning, everyone's probably heard of it. So I'll give you a few quick numbers just to sort of set the stage, and I'll try to talk kind of quick. So Ivy Tech, as you heard this morning, we have about 870,000 students in our system today, about 170,000 we'll see in the next 12 months. We have about 9,000 employees, 140 buildings across Indiana. We have students from all 50 states, all over the world with the military. We do a lot of online courses. We offer about 60,000 course sections every year. So every section of math, that would be 1, then 2, then 3. So we have 60,000 of those. We get about 24 million emails a day. We have 20 gigabyte connection to the internet, 24,000 PCs, about 9,000 iPads, and a lot of stuff. So that being said, the college generates on a daily basis about 100 million rows of data across all of our systems. We have about 1,100 servers and 1,200 applications. So we generate a lot of data. When I first arrived there 5 years ago, we reported on less than 1% of that data. So the college reporting system used a sliver of the data to make all of its business decisions. It seemed wrong then, and it was. So what we started down the path, and it's a lot of detail I won't bore you with. We started down the path of we need something better than what we have. So we worked with another cloud provider. I won't mention the name of them. And we did a prototype with them, and it didn't go very well. And then Amazon announced Redshift, and I think we were probably the second or third customer the day it was announced. We jumped on it immediately and had a lot of success with that. Our old reporting environment took about 9 hours to regenerate every night. It's a traditional data warehouse. Our new system, which we call Newt, the Newt system regenerates in about 30 minutes as opposed to the 9 hours. We had reports in the old system that would easily take, I don't know, an hour or two to run, and that was normal across the business units. They thought that was acceptable. When we started down the path of building our own system based on Redshift, we decided that that was not good, and I set the bar for 30 seconds for no query. All queries will take 30 seconds or less. And so our team thought I was crazy, and they may probably still do think I'm a little crazy. But we've been able to hit that mark. I actually just the other day had one of the registrars from one of our business units come up to me and tell me that I had ruined her whole day because she used to come in and run a report, and then she would go talk to somebody, then she would run her next report and go get coffee, run her next report and go do some other things. And by the time that lunch rolled around, her 4 reports were ready.
She got her exercise.
Yeah. So now her 4 reports are done in less than 2 minutes, and that is not an exaggeration. And that's the improvement that we made. Based on that, then we also started doing a lot of predictive modeling, which you heard a little bit about today. And so we use a variety of tools, and we've iterated over this several times over the last 3 years, doing machine learning algorithms to learn behaviors of students. And so the idea is students will either succeed or fail, right? I mean, everybody in here either succeeded or failed in school. And we want to know as quickly as possible which path that you're on so that we can take proactive measures to maybe stop if it's negative, or encourage if it's positive, or if it's positive, learn what it is that you're doing that works so well. So now we gather data from about 35 different systems or so around the college. We aggregate all that in Redshift, and we run predictive models on it, and we can talk about the details later, I guess. But what we're able to do then is after about 2 weeks of a 16-week term, on about week 2, we know with a very high degree of accuracy which path you're on. So starting this fall, which is new for Ivy Tech, we actually have a coaching initiative where we have a team of people that are going to be assigned individual students based on the predictive modeling, and they're going to coach those students that show up on the list. And it's not a good list necessarily, but if you show up on that list, you're going to have a coach assigned to you walking you through how to be successful in college. So that's some of the things that we're doing to try to help the students and have fun while we're doing it.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. I won't ask for metrics because I think you covered those.
I'm a numbers guy.
One thing that I think was interesting, could you talk a little bit about the fraud, the financial aid? Because I think that was kind of a surprise to you, and I'd love to have you share that.
Yeah, so we've actually learned a lot of things. As we started looking at data from all these different systems, a lot of patterns popped out that no one expected. Some of them good, some of them not so good. One that actually turned out to be pretty good was we started doing geospatial modeling, and so we look at where people live as opposed to where they register for class. We have an algorithm that determines drive time, so we know if you sign up for a class and it's a 45-minute drive that maybe that's not the best move for you. But one of the patterns that popped out had to do with fraud. And so the way the financial aid works, is you guys probably know this better than I do, is quite complicated, and it costs the school a lot of money. So with some of the modeling that we were doing, we stumbled across some very odd patterns actually coming out of Mississippi, believe it or not. And we're able to determine these were fraud rings that were they were trying to defraud the college of financial aid dollars. So they would get that financial aid check and then never actually do anything, and then the college ends up paying that back. So using some of the algorithms, we were able to find some very distinct, I won't tell you what they are because that would defeat the purpose, some very distinct patterns of fraud that we can key on immediately. And so within seconds of an application coming in, we can determine whether we believe that application is fraudulent or not, and then take appropriate action with that. And we've saved a lot of money by doing that.
It's awesome. Yeah, wonderful. Debbie, I'd love to have everyone hear your story, because I think there's some really interesting things you've been doing as well.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm Debbie Giles. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. And I am a digital assets manager there. I'm in the data analysis and visualization group. So we do a lot of really cool web applications. Everything's usually data-driven, and we usually are supporting our analysts in-house, our scientists, and then we also build data and tools for the external audience, so industry, and then also entrepreneurs to try to hopefully build new businesses and make new jobs in the world in the area of renewable energy. So as you can tell, so we're a renewable energy shop, so our mission is science and research, and so it's natural that our OCIO office doesn't necessarily support our computers 24/7, but as we started really building out these open data sets and other types of data-driven applications, we really needed to have high availability, be really agile, be really innovative with the things that we're creating. We were collaborating a lot with external entities. We're doing crowdsourced data development. And in order to do that, it was going to be really difficult to kind of cross over our firewalls and inside the lab. So we have been using AWS now for 7 years. That's a long time ago, and I think in the world of cloud services. And so when we first started, we kind of didn't know what we were doing, but we were like, we just need to get something else that's outside of the laboratory. So we started off procuring our labs, our cloud services with P cards, so kind of like a credit card. And so we were doing that for a while, and then all of a sudden, like our procurement guys were like, you really shouldn't be using a credit card. We should do something more serious here. So then we kind of went through a third-party vendor for a while. And so the progression now is that we are now contracting directly with Amazon. We're saving a lot more money that way. So we're doing our procurement that way. Through that progression as well, we also determined that we needed to get a full authority to operate. Some of our applications that we were building in the beginning were .orgs. They weren't necessarily .govs, but we are building both .govs and .orgs now on the cloud at AWS. And so we have a full authority to operate provided by the Department of Energy now. So, and this is, obviously, we're out there in the cloud, so this is something that could be leveraged by other federal agencies if anybody wanted to do so. As if you've tried it, it's very difficult sometimes to get the full authority to operate, especially, and by the way, we are approved for low-level data as well as moderate-level data. Some of our applications required moderate-level data. So we now have an ATO to hold moderate-level data in the AWS environment, meeting all of the NIST 800 Rev 4 standards. So that's kind of on, oh, and then the other thing is in the beginning, when we really wanted to take advantage of AWS, you know, the executive management at NREL was like, well, you know, I'm not sure, I don't know where that fits in our business model. So when people wanted to do it, we would just do it on a project-by-project basis. And projects would be paying independently for the Amazon services, which was fine. But what that meant was that they had to make the conscious decision to move to Amazon, knowing that it was going to cost more than any of our internal servers did. And people still did it, a whole bunch, which shows that there was some benefit there. And now we have more than 30 applications that are on AWS. And now it's kind of elevated to the point where our OCIO office and our financial office have all recognized that they want to treat our cloud services just like they treat our internal servers. So executive management has now bought off on helping to fund the servers just like we would internally. So now the projects individually don't need to pay for their servers. The server cost is now free to them. And then the usage is also free. But we're kind of working out that model because now that they know this, people are saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to put terabytes of data on there. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe at a certain point. So we're still working out the details. But the great news is that people are excited and ready and coming to use the platform. We're building all kinds of things out there, mostly open data and openly available web applications. But we also have built things, like I said, with moderate level data. We've built data catalogs and data repositories for DOE and for NREL. And then our first one was a geothermal data repository, and then that followed by a marine hydrokinetic data repository. And the gist of those is that DOE has given grant money to a number of different projects out there, and they wanted to collect that data. So we have a process in place now to allow these folks to put their data in. Then we have go through a curation process. The metadata is made openly available immediately because we want to know what kind of data sets are out there. But depending on the different contract agreements, some of the data needs to be held for up to 5 years as in a moratorium. So we can hold that data for even up to 5 years, but when that data is able to be released to the public, we release it to the public so that it can be all openly available. But we do want to make sure that the metadata is open right away, because if somebody else is working on a data set that looks similar or acts similar to some of those, we want to make those connections sooner than later. We don't want to wait 5 years and have somebody recreate the wheel. So this way we can make connections with people beforehand. And so maybe the data can't be released to the whole public, but maybe between entities it can be. And just the last thing I'll say is that DOE is increasingly coming to us and saying, this is great, we want you to build more of these applications that are helping industry or helping the entrepreneurs, but we don't want to pay for them forever. We want them to be self-sustaining. So we're really focused on that, and AWS is really a great platform for that, because we could build it in the cloud with the intent from the beginning to transition it to industry, so that transfer can be really easy when that time comes.
That's awesome. I smile when you say 7 years. At Amazon, if you work at Amazon, we sometimes make a joke about this, that if you've been there a year, we count it in dog years. So if you've only been there a year, it's actually 7 years. So that would mean you've been on AWS 49 years.
Okay.
But I want to just ask a question myself about, you've talked about quite a bit of process to get where you are, and I think the length of time shows all the transitions you've been through. What was it that originally started all of this innovation? Because it sounds like there's been a lot, but what was it that first got going for your team to get this on the road?
Yeah, so our very first open data application was something called OpenEI, or Open Energy Information. And the whole point of it was to get open energy data out there to the public for their use, way before the open data policies were really even in place. So it's pretty cutting edge, and we wanted to get that data out there. We had a lot of APIs. It was a semantic media wiki website, so it enabled people to actually make changes on the fly on the website, which, like, our OCIO office would have had a heart attack if they were doing that internal. So we had to look for some other option. So that's what we did. And then the other thing about being 24/7, we have a lot of APIs that are being relied on by entrepreneurs. They're building businesses on these things, and so we can't have our APIs going down. So really the 24/7 is a big one for us as well.
Perfect, perfect. So we have about 12, 13 minutes. I certainly have some questions, but I'd love to open it up first. Does anyone have any questions? I've got a microphone, and I'll come let you speak to so everybody can hear the question. I'm gonna make sure this is working. Yes.
Great panel, by the way. I just wanted to ask a question. I work in a large agency, and with cloud innovation, they know it's there, but getting people to focus on it is a challenge. So I want to know if you have any best practices or ideas of how to get people to stop playing the hot potato game and really focus on moving to the cloud and the importance of it.
Can I take that one? To me, that's the key to change, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about technology, the bits and bytes, but at the end of the day, what do we really make decisions for? We're actually making decisions to solve problems and further the mission of the state and local, federal, or educational, what have you. So something that I can say, we've done is I've actually taken some of the lessons learned from what we did at the Recovery Board to remove technology from the equation, right? And then we actually built a whole approach to help customers get over that hump, because it's when you're constantly looking at the VMs, AMIs, availability zones, and what have you, you begin the conversation. Two interesting things happen. One, you're going to alienate certain people that are decision makers from conversations, right? Just imagine, you all, actually, this is a good question. If I were to ask you all, if you're trying to solve a business goal, meaning you have real business problems, you have to provide information out to your customers, you have applications where that do a purpose, right? They're in place for a purpose. Do you think your executives, your legal folks are going to sit down with you and have an honest discussion about virtualization? Raise your hand if you think so, right? So what happens is what's required is what we call strategic advisory services, right? Where you remove technology from the equation and start to focus on strategy, goals, objectives. What is it that you're trying to get out the other end, and when? And what does it mean? What's that journey? What are you doing today? What's your moment of truth today? And what do you want your moment of truth for tomorrow to be? And the gap between those two is where innovation lies. But the interesting thing is by having that discussion, open discussion, with forcing folks to sit, because you have to have this discussion with executives sitting down at the table together, right? Now a lot of the tree huggers types of scenarios begin to go away, because now you're actually having real discussions based on strategy, goals, and objectives, actual issues that you have, risks, contingencies, mandates that you have to meet. And now you begin to start to look at this a lot differently. So now when you start to look at the journey to get there, right? now you can actually have an open and honest discussion, and a lot of those strange discussions go away. So long answer to a short question was, remove technology from the equation. And I had to do that at the board, where I had to get 13 IGs to agree to migrate to the cloud. Right? And that's a challenge in itself. So remove it from the equation and have a consulting type discussion, right? And then now you begin to start to look at what are my alternatives, what are the opportunities for innovation to actually meet these goals and objectives. And now you begin to actually see how you can have real discussions and get real progression.
Yep.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Chris, Lige, Debbie, any other responses to that?
Yeah, so, we work with such a large part of the U.S. government in particular, so we have different sort of experiences there. And we do provide some of those consulting services more around cloud strategy, what we call a quick look assessments and things like that to help organizations in migrating to the cloud. And we sort of see three groups. You have the groups that seem to not really be incentivized to go there, whether it's fear of losing jobs or just not, they feel like their applications are running well, it's all good to go. Then you have a second group that is more the lift and shift type of organizations, where it's purely about, saving money and things like that. And then of course you have more of the cloud innovators within the government, and we've been, GSA, for example, we work with one program there that it's really cool stuff what we're doing for them. Other parts of the government where we see some of those innovators. And so, to try to get some of these organizations to move out like that, a lot of times it has to do with the funding. In a lot of cases, we were talking with one CIO within the government the other day, and it's almost like, okay, they might not be incentivized to save money in certain cases because they lose it the next budget year. Are there ways to work it out so that they can reuse the funding that they're saving from year to year and to reinvest it back into innovation within the applications themselves? I don't know if you have a similar observation in the federal government.
Yes, definitely. And I would say, honestly, we're still struggling with it. It sounds like everything's perfect, but it's not that perfect. We're still struggling with it because I would like to create a true cloud strategy for the laboratory, which we honestly don't have right now. And there is a difference. I'm actually in our analysis group, so I work very closely with the analysts. I'm not in OCIO. So OCIO has another opinion about what we should be doing with the cloud, and I think a lot of it has to do with them feeling like they may lose jobs,
Yeah.
or and so we're still working out those details. But
Lige, any comments on that?
I mean, for us, it's probably a little bit different. One of the sayings in our department is bigger, better, faster. And so we're always looking for opportunities to do things better for the business, faster for the business. And it's really a cultural thing. 5 years ago when I arrived at the college, one of my higher level IT people came to me and said, I don't want to learn anything new. And I told her she was in the wrong field because the way that happened in the past is not the way it's going to go in the future. So we really, the culture is much different in our organization. We really foster innovation. Good ideas are a good thing. We play video games. We have contests who can name silly songs from the 80s. We constantly do other things to stimulate creative thinking. We don't sit in cubes all day for 8 hours. We have helicopter races with remote control helicopters to get people thinking differently. And I know it sounds really silly, but we have really come up with some of the best ideas that we've ever had during those euchre tournaments or the Pac-Man tournaments that we have, because people are talking and thinking just a little bit differently. And so we really foster more of that startup mentality without the stock options. But the startup mentality, we get people thinking, and it's a culture thing. And so once you have a group of people together that think that way, it feeds upon itself, at least in our organization.
I'm sure several are wanting to know, Lige, are you hiring?
Actually, there might be a couple positions.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Are there other questions?
Gentlemen over here.
How you doing? I guess this is a question for Debbie, but would welcome the panel's input. So, as a software engineer from the private sector, the idea of federal data sets available for entrepreneurs and for public consumption I think it's a great idea. But question would be, outside of startups, are you guys doing things that sort of demonstrate types of things that you could do with these data sets? Second question would be, just from what I've looked at, there was an earlier discussion about some of the geospatial stuff. Is there a move towards more event-driven, real-time data availability to organizations, to consumers, rather than some of the static sets? So I guess those are the two things.
So yeah, I think so. Like streaming data, is that what you're talking about? So yes, I mean we're focused on trying to get as much data out there as possible. There's a new initiative we're working on right now. It's called Wind for Schools, and that will be streaming data from wind turbines across the country. So I think there's a little bit of that. And then as far as telling folks what they possibly can do with the data, I honestly think we could do a better job with that. Right now, we've been really focused on getting the data out there, putting it in machine-readable formats, making sure that the proper licensing is attributed to it and all that. But I think it's a great point that we should probably help people kind of try to figure out what they can do with the data as well. But I think we can do better on that one, to be honest. But we don't have a lot of funding, so that's part of the issue.
So a lot is happening in that space, though. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Data Act, right? So when you look, and I had the fortune of writing part of the Data Act. So the goal of the Data Act is to embed standards in federal spending data, so it could become more usable, and have standards in place. So now you can actually provide this from an open government perspective to the citizens, right? So. And I'll task everyone in here to do this. If you actually get on Google and look state by state and federal agency by federal agency and look at the strategic plans, you're going to see a consistent theme across all of them, which is open government and transparency. That's going to be in every state and federal strategic plan. What does that entail? Exactly what you're saying. It is, now everyone's at different levels of maturity, right? I mean, in some cases, and I'm not going to name a state, right? The view is we have, let's say a few thousand data sets and we're making them available, go for it, right? But you have everything from that perspective to actually providing state level information using local data, state and local and federal data, to actually visualize it for you in parallel with provide APIs for developers like you to be able to create your own applications from these services. So that's happening systemically across the country, and you can actually go and check, and it's at different levels. And what you're starting to see now between agencies, individual agencies have a goal of becoming service providers to other agencies, meaning pushing and pulling. Why should I, from agency X, recreate and try and build this data that agency Y actually collects, and that is their job, this is within their appropriation. So what's happening now is individual agencies are creating APIs and making them available. Some are specific to the different types of government, whether it be federal, state, and local. And out of that is different portions of the data sets that are made publicly available to everyone. So the question you're asking is, there's a huge initiative to make key government data available to citizens in machine-readable format for you to do exactly what you're trying to do.
In all the predictive analysis that we do, we use Department of Labor data extensively. When it comes to where students may live and the unemployment rate and the different areas, the different market segments that we may be teaching in, we use that data extensively with all of our predictions. And so we use it all the time.
I'm going to give another agency a plug, SSA, right? SSA, they actually have they provide a lot of this information as APIs for information on individuals or classes of individuals, right? Death information and what have you. So it's several federal agencies, like you said, make this information available.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases what the Data Act enables is for those PMs within the government you know, we try to provide a platform upon which more readily available financial reporting can be done on an agency-by-agency basis, where you can drill down to the contract, CLIN, and really get the financial data that before would take, you know, so much effort to get that different financial data off of spreadsheets or wherever else. And so there's a lot of work being done in that regard as well.
And you can plug some of that from USA Spending as well, right? API is available. So.
Perfect. Well, we've run out of time. I want to thank the panel so much for sharing about innovation, and thank you all for joining us. Have a good rest of your night.